Chapter 17, Fisher Tells Miss Lee's Tale. She never talks about it anymore, but my mom knew a ghost once, Fisher says quietly. I settle into the soft cushions on the Lee's living room sofa and hug my knees. Roger won't tell me what was so bad about me seeing our ghost. He just got quiet for the rest of the day. He only spoke when necessary to give me things to do at the station. And then, as he drove the engine into the train shed for the night, he asked me if Fisher saw Miss Amanda's ghost. I told him Fisher hadn't been with me when I saw her, and that when we went looking for her again, she wasn't there. All Roger said was, "Well, that's good." Fisher watches the kitchen carefully through the doorway that joins the two rooms, making sure our conversation is private. The grown-ups are still at the dinner table. Roger and Mr. Lee are on their second and third helpings of Mrs. Lee's delicious green chicken curry. They're discussing some trouble Mr. Lee is having with the new habitats in the reptile house and about a keeper at the harbor reef who's been missing shifts. "They can't hear us," I say. "Tell me about the ghost." Fisher picks up a stack of his baseball cards from the teakwood table near the couch. Beneath the protective glass top, a hand-carved scene depicts a busy Thai village full of trees and people carrying baskets. The carvings are so detailed that I've always wanted to touch the texture on the ferns and the coconut palms. Fisher passes his baseball cards back and forth from one hand to the other. "When my mom was a girl living in California, her dad still had a business in Thailand sometimes. My grandpa's business in Thailand is how he met my grandma, you know." I nod. I did know that Mrs. Lee's American dad was in Thailand on business when he met her mom. They were married and moved to California after that. "When my mom was 10, my grandparents took her to Thailand for a few months while my grandpa was working there. That summer," Fisher pauses to glance at the kitchen doorway again, "my mom's best friend back home in California died in an accident." The air feels heavy as I hear this. I hug my knees tighter. I didn't expect the conversation to go this direction. "Fisher, that's awful." Fisher is my best friend. I can't imagine what I would do if he died in an accident. It hurts even to consider it. I suddenly want to go into the kitchen and hug Mrs. Lee really tight. "Well, when they got home to California, my mom kept running away and disappearing. My grandparents would search for hours with no idea where she went. And when they would find her, she would say that she'd been with her friend that had died." I feel a chill that's not from the ceiling fan spinning overhead. Fisher keeps shuffling through his baseball cards, not looking at them. "Well, pretty soon my grandparents couldn't keep her from running off, and she would say that she needed to visit her friend. People kept an eye on the place the girl was buried, but my mom was never there." Goosebumps prickle over my arms and neck. "She was with her best friend's ghost. My mom says that they'd go to the park or down to the beach and they'd talk like when her friend was alive. And the problem was, the longer her friend was a ghost, the more forgetful she got. My mom had to reteach her things every time they were together." "Hey, Fisher!" Mr. Lee has stepped into the living room, startling us so much that I nearly fall off the couch, and Fisher drops half of his baseball card stack. "Hey, do you guys want dessert?" I sometimes forget that Mr. Lee is completely bald underneath the Indiana Jones-style hat that he wears for work. He shaves his head because he was losing his hair anyway, and Fisher says Mr. Lee didn't like being only partially bald. "Yeah, Bixley sent me home with leftover brownies and ice cream from the AZA meeting today," he says. "You're welcome to it." Mr. Lee meets with people from the Association of Zoos and Aquariums to be sure the zoo stays compliant. It seems Mr. Bixley provides the treats. Mr. Lee fills up doorways much like Roger does. Besides working on Wyoming Ranch when he was a boy and playing football in college, he was a wildlife ranger in Nairobi, Kenya, and in a documentary movie before becoming the wildlife expert that he is for the zoo. Mr. Lee is the zoo's very own superstar, but to us, he's just Fisher's dad. Fisher takes a deep breath and gives me a look of relief. "Yeah, we'll be right there." We don't eat in the living room at the Lee's house, only at the kitchen. Mr. Lee starts to head back to the kitchen and then quickly turns around. Oh, how was your first day of baseball lessons, son? Are you going to be the next Johnny Damon? Who? I ask. He's a Major League Baseball player, Fisher tells me. I found out his mom is Thai, so we kind of have that in common. He also played for the Royals. Fisher gets to go to Kansas City to train with the pros this summer, Mr. Lee says, sounding super proud. Did he tell you? Yes, I say, trying hard to sound excited. I can't imagine wanting to play baseball for 3 solid weeks. It seems like that would get boring. But I do think it's cool that Mr. Lee has a football trophy sitting in a display case in the living room. Yet he's happy for Fisher, who wants to play a different sport. Yeah, the lessons are going great, Dad, Fisher says. Coach says I'm really doing well throwing to the corner of the strike zone. My velocity isn't as good as some my age, but he says that my command is better. I have no idea what he's talking about. Fisher and I haven't talked baseball in this sort of detail. Well, that's good news, Mr. Lee says. Be sure to let Grandma know how much you're enjoying the lessons. I will, Fisher says. Mr. Lee returns to the kitchen and continues a conversation with Roger and Mrs. Lee about the AZA and the recent cooperation between the Lexington Zoo and the Denver Zoo. Fisher picks up the cards that he dropped and says, So where was I? Your mom had to help her friend remember things, I prompt. Oh yeah, well, pretty soon my mom spent every moment she could with her friend's ghost to teach her all the things that she couldn't remember. I heard my mom tell Roger once that spending time with ghosts makes you forget how to live. She and Roger had an argument about ghosts and whether they can be trusted. So that's why Roger seemed upset after I told him that I saw Miss Amanda today, and that's why he was glad Fisher didn't see her. Because of Miss Lee. Well, how did she ever stop seeing her friend? What happened? Fisher fidgets with his baseball cards some more. Well, my mom disappeared again, only this time no one could find her for 2 days. The police were looking at everything. Everyone was afraid that she'd been kidnapped or drowned in the ocean. When they finally found her, my mom said that she'd been with her ghost friend. 2 days? That's really bad. Yeah, my grandparents decided they had to get her away from the ghost for good, so they all moved to Omaha, where my grandpa had a business opportunity. My mom knew it wouldn't be long before her ghost friend would forget her and all their memories together. It takes 3 days to drive from LA to Omaha, you know that? And my grandma says that my mom cried almost the whole way. Poor Mrs. Lee, I whisper under my breath, thinking of a little girl version of Fern Lee crying about losing her friend. Makes my throat start to tighten up. I lean over the teakwood table and imagine the scene in the Thai village coming to life. These beautiful things in the Lee's house have always reminded me that everyone has a piece of their life that's different from what we know. But I never really thought about the feelings attached to that life before. Maybe Mrs. Lee and her parents visited a village in Thailand like the one carved in this table. Maybe this is similar to where her mother grew up. I think that the wooden scene probably reminds Mrs. Lee of good things, a place that's special to her and her family, as well as the sadness of coming home from Thailand as a girl to find out that her friend died. A sort of happy sad table. And that's why you can't say anything to my mom about Miss Amanda, because she will absolutely lose it. She believes in ghosts, but she doesn't like the idea of them. Well, I won't tell her about Miss Amanda, I say. What do you think, though? Should we be worried about talking to Miss Amanda? She's losing her memories just like your mom's friend. Nah, Fisher says, stacking his baseball cards with his favorite Royals pitcher on top. It's not the same at all. You didn't know her before, and she isn't going to trap you into reminding her about her life, because you don't know anything about her life, right? Right. I think so. A tiny gnat of a thought buzzes into my brain, and I sort of wish I could swat it away. I completely lost track of time when I was with Miss Amanda's ghost. I forgot about lunch with Roger, and I never forget that. I wonder if this losing track of time is how it started with Mrs. Lee and her ghost friend. Chapter 18, Wind Immersion. Hey, let's have dessert and then go, Fisher whispers. While my mom was cooking dinner, I went back to the gift shop and propped open the employee entrance. Isabel was closing up and she didn't notice. Nice work, Fisher, I say with as much enthusiasm as I dare without drawing attention. I'd rather leave now, but Fisher never passes up food, and if we leave without dessert, everybody will be suspicious. The brownies and ice cream look good, but I prefer Mrs. Lee's green curry with chicken and red peppers to the ultra-sweet stuff, so I ask for dinner leftovers instead. Roger and Mr. Lee change the subject from the AZA elephant regulations and move on to paper lanterns, of all things. No, I told them absolutely no balloons, Mr. Lee tells Roger. His arm is resting on the back of Mrs. Lee's chair, and she relaxes against him. They wanted to do a special tribute and release a bunch of balloons, and we can't have balloons near the animals. Well, but isn't there a risk with the paper lanterns as well? Roger asks. Mr. Lee finishes off his coffee and nods. Oh, we're working out the details. These are high-profile zoo donors who want to rent out the zoo for a family reunion, and we want to keep them happy while not putting our animals at risk. Mrs. Ashby is one donor we definitely do not want to offend, and she thinks she's found biodegradable sky lanterns. The paper completely burns up, and so does the fuel cell, and that's all that's left behind is a bit of cardboard when it's finished. Mrs. Lee joins in. We bought a box of them and thought we could try out a few, follow them and see what's left when they land. Honestly, I think we'll be telling the Ashby family they can plant seeds of indigenous flowers for their special tribute. Well, Roger says, nodding, that might work. Fisher finishes his ice cream and announces, I think I left one of my baseball cards up by the gift shop. Is it okay if Lex goes with me to find it? Brilliant. Yeah, it's okay with me, Roger says. Mrs. Lee nods. Clear your dishes and take out the trash first. So we take the trash out to the dumpster behind the zookeeper's residence and pull the lid down. Although most of our animals are inside enclosures, the many birds and squirrels will make a disaster with open garbage. It's dark now and the screeching hum of the cicadas has quieted. Without the constant mumble of the zoo crowds, the crickets have the nighttime stage and sing out strong. The air smells of rain-soaked concrete and the sour, earthy scent of layered, damp leaves. We leave the gravel road and turn on to the main path up the hill. The African grasslands are not far in the other direction, and I ache to see Naya, but we'd be breaking about 10 zoo rules if I went to the elephant barn. I'm not sure how many we're going to break at the gift shop. That was a good excuse you made in there, I say. Well, it wasn't really a lie, Fisher says. I really did leave one of my baseball cards at the gift shop. It gave us an actual reason. With how much my mom checks up on things, I figured I'd better make it real. Good plan, I say, still wishing that we could sneak inside the elephant barn first. I want to tell Naya what I found in the trees today, and I want to see what else she might show me if I can feel her low rumble and look into her eyes again. But in a few hours it'll be morning, and Fisher and I can return to the barn when Thomas is there. I hope Naya will come to the training gates. Do you think Naya knew about Miss Amanda and the treasure? I ask, mostly to myself, but loud enough so Fisher can hear. Fisher, who's ahead of me on the hill, turns around and holds his arm out with a big, I don't know. Lex, I'm still trying to figure out why you hear the wind and the elephant speak at all. Elephant, I correct him. Only one. True, but that might change. Who knows? Hey, I have a theory about the wind and Naya, if you want to hear it. Fisher raises his eyebrows and waits for me to continue. Well, I met them both on the same night. I escaped one and found the other, so maybe... The crickets quiet for a moment as if they need to hear what I have to say, and the wind is completely still. Maybe losing my family and being alone taught me I had to stand up to the wind and find a friend, and it all just kind of stuck with me. The lamppost light angles across Fisher's face. He nods. Well, that actually makes a lot of sense. And my heart squeezes a little when I realize how much I'm going to miss him when he goes to baseball camp. Even with all the animals and other people in the zoo, I'll feel like Karana on her island when he leaves. I shake all that off for a moment. I mean, I did survive the biggest tornado in Nebraska's history in like 40 years. That kind of thing could teach a person a few things. That's true. Fisher picks up a loose rock from behind the path and rolls it around in his fingers. An even bigger idea starts to take shape in my mind. I'm thinking of Korana in my book and how she didn't understand the language of the Aleuts, the strangers who came to her island to hunt. They didn't understand her either. Your mom speaks 2 languages because she had parents who spoke both Thai and English to her, right? Yeah, she still speaks Thai to my grandma sometimes. And when your grandparents, took all of you to visit Thailand a few years ago, you said you didn't understand the language when you were there. Yeah, right. My mom didn't teach me Thai when I was little, only a few phrases. Okay, so I was thinking about how people learn to communicate when they're young. Maybe I learned the wind's language and Naya's language so easily because I was so close to it, and I was young when I heard it. Fisher stops walking as we reach the top where the path curves in front of the main gates. His eyes widen. It's like the kids who go to Spanish immersion at school. The kindergartners pick it up really fast because they're young and they're hearing a lot of Spanish. It's like concentrated orange juice. Concentrated orange juice? Yeah! Fisher looks like he's discovered some secret of the universe. A lot of strong stuff in a small container. Fisher, I'm still not... I shake my head, not understanding him. Fisher drops the rock he's been holding and gestures up at the sky. What's the strongest, most concentrated form of wind? His voice grows more intense and excited with every word. A tornado, right? You were so close to the wind in its most concentrated form that you barely escaped it. And you were young and you were really small. It was like wind immersion. A proud smile spreads across his face. Instead of Spanish immersion, you had wind immersion. And elephant immersion, I add. The lampposts cast yellow light over the entrance building, and a bluish glow illuminates the inside of the gift shop. A single light is on in the upstairs office. Frank Bixley's office.